From the KATC Weatherland, here's Rob's forecast.
Welcome back. Well, it has been a summer and early fall we can't forget readily when we're still seeing 95 degrees this afternoon, tying the record set back in 2005 and several years before that as well. And we have more heat on the way. But why not? Let's talk about winter. So let's take a look at what the Climate Prediction Center is talking about as we look at the months of December, January, and February coming up. And with a strong El Nino in place, this is the forecast, and this is probably going to come close to verifying above normal rainfall across the Gulf South, maybe even a stronger signal as you go farther to the east, up to the north. It looks equal chances, and maybe a little bit below precip for the northern portion of the country, but wetter than normal pattern. That is very typical of El Nino patterns. And then you look at the temperature forecast, and equal chances, but typically when you have this El Nino situation, our days are cloudier and our nights are cloudier. So how is it all going to stack up? Let's take a look. I think it's going to be a cloudy, wet winter for Acadiana. So enjoy the sun now. Wetter than normal means more clouds for sure. So that means cooler days, not necessarily colder. We could have a few cold days, but milder nights. So El Nino winters are generally milder overall. In fact, our average temperature is usually above normal, but we make it up by the milder nights. The days are usually cooler than normal. So that's something that we'll watch for. Slightly higher risk for an ice storm, perhaps during El Nino years when you have more precip and you have sometimes some cold air lurking around. Usually we see an ice storm in Acadiana once every 5 years, is closer to once every 4 years during El Nino years. So statistically somewhat significant, but we're not promising anything. There may be a lack of Arctic intrusions. We go back to this map right here. Look at this, above normal temperatures across the northern high plains. So that means maybe not much in the way of real cold air, but it can be colder for us, even though it's not as cold for our friends up to the north. But there may be one or two big cold fronts this winter. So the bottom line, enjoy the sun we've had this summer. It will be probably limited going into especially January and February. We usually see it on the back end of the winter forecast where it gets wetter than normal. So we'll see how it plays out. Pretty quiet across the area today. Few showers offshore. We do have a weak frontal boundary draped across the area, but we're just seeing a very stable atmosphere, mainly to our north and west. This is not rainfall. It's just funky ground clutter or atmospheric clutter out there. Gulf of Mexico, nice and quiet, tropically speaking, still unsettled. Western Caribbean through Florida, where it's going to stay wet. And then we have Tropical Storm Philippe that is still holding on and actually getting a little bit better organized. And the next tropical depression that's going to develop, this is going to be Rena, but they are very close together. And look, Philippe is getting a little bit more dominant. This is going to go off to the west and is going to have to get some distance away from this tropical disturbance, this area of low pressure right here. But if we track both systems, Philippe will be heading toward the Caribbean as a much weaker system. And new tonight at 10, Invest 91L may have a westward component toward the Caribbean as well, but we do think it's going to stay out in the open Atlantic. So we'll watch it for the Caribbean, but no issues here. And when you're saying no issues on just about the anniversary of Hurricane Ian going back to last year in the Gulf of Mexico, we're getting in better shape. So as we head toward tomorrow morning, this little frontal trough will be moving on through. Drier air is going to be behind it. Temperatures back into the 90s, but look at the dew points. The dew points coming down tomorrow into the 60s and perhaps the 50s, and that lower humidity will make Friday morning feel better. Notice showers lingering offshore with that frontal trough. It sticks around, but for the most part, we're going to be on the dry side of things as we go into the weekend, and only getting drier as we progress into next week. So lower 70s overnight tonight. We'll go low to mid 90s the high tomorrow. That heat index right around 100 or 101 still. We're still talking about that. Maybe a tad bit cooler tomorrow night into Friday morning, and Friday afternoon back into the 90s once again. So overnight tonight, quiet evening, 98% of a full harvest moon, officially full going into tomorrow night and also Saturday night. The last supermoon though of the year. It's big and bright out there already, so So enjoy it as it rises. 93 the high for tomorrow with mostly sunny skies. Some high clouds mixing in mainly during the morning hours, but again, it should be a pretty quiet day across the area. And as we move forward, mid-90s into the weekend. Then as we get into next week, we'll favor lower 90s. Overnight lows, upper 60s to lower 70s. But at the end of the 10-day forecast, notice I drew a little front there. And maybe slightly cooler weather on the way. I wouldn't get excited. Maybe.
Exclamation point.
You took that road trip?
Yes.
No more question marks.
We talked about last night to Canada to go get it and bring it down?
Well, you know, I think we're shaming the atmosphere into
Finally.
It's going to take 10 days. It's going UPS ground.
There you go.
It's taking its time.
It'll get here. Thank you, Rob. We'll be